Why, hello there. It's me, Jeremy, your favorite bald dude telling you about Standard and Strange, a store and a brand with simple rules. Sell clothes they themselves would wear, manufacture it ethically, and build it to last. From boots made in Oregon to loop wheel garments made in Japan, find all the best clothes for your wardrobe at Standard and Strange. StandardandStrange.com. Hey folks, it's Blamo. I'm Jeremy Kirkland, back from New York. I am. And lots to download here. Jeez Louise. I promise I'll save it for a solo pod. But the trip was great. Lots of meetings, link and build, whatever crap you want to use to fill in the blanks. It's kind of perfect because I go up there just long enough to get annoyed that I'm there again, and poof, I'm back home coloring Elsa from Frozen with my daughter. I mean, it's just, it's magic. But enough about that. This week, I'm joined by Blake, Malin, and Zach Weiss of Worn and Wound. And look, if you're new to the pod, we always try to keep these as a conversation. We don't really do interviews. That's not a cop-out. It's just, it's kind of where we go. And we went down an avenue that I did not expect. It was a little bit more of a mental health check and what it means to be into things that may make folks assume other things. Look, I'm being a little bit cryptic on purpose. But we dive into the concept of online persona of the watch fan and how to be content, all while kind of interweaving our own stories and experiences through it. So look, if you're not even a watch person or you're a something person, well, all of us, we're into something that maybe we're a little bit shy to communicate about, or maybe we're a little bit too obnoxious about how much we love it. But we go all over there. It's great. We discuss the persona of watch fans, the pop-up flea, why it's okay to like an Apple Watch, why my MoonSwatchs are trash, and debate whether or not it's easy to get into watches now. Let's go. Watches.
Well, apologies on behalf of the watch community.
The whole point of this show is we can have deeper conversations about things that are silly and artificial, and also recognize that those things aren't the things that fulfill us. What unites us in clothes is the fact that we want to be accepted for who we are and for our taste. It's the same thing with watches. It's not about, to be honest, Worn and Wound does a really good job of this, where it's not about how much the watch you have is worth or even the provenance and the story, but it's just you liking it and you being fine with it is enough. Like the whole, I don't know if it was you, Zach, or someone had done like a watches and like mental health thing. It might have even been on like Twitter or something, where it was just like breaking down like these, like let's stop, assuming that if someone has a watch that's this, that they are this type of person, or someone that has a watch.
Sounds interesting.
Yeah, it was nice. It was like just almost like a tweet thread or something. Because I think that there's certain stigmas attached, just like in clothes. If you have a nice watch, you do this, or you vote this way, or you own this. Cars are the same thing. There's, fill in any item that might be difficult to get, or any luxury piece where someone's gonna, again, music, a person who listens to X band. Oh, you must like A, B, C, D, and E, just so we can all kind of like size up who that person is and find out whether or not, we should be friends with them. I think it's, all these little silly material things, again, at the end of the day, it's just stuff. It doesn't, just because, Zach likes death metal punk rock doesn't mean that, he's a anarchist or whatever, some sort of 1980s.
Satanist, please.
Yeah, Satanist. Yeah. So I don't know. It's silly, and here we are.
I think on that point about like, watches kind of symbolizing, or sort of people think that it kind of says who you are. I think like just with Worn and Wound, sort of when we started, it really was kind of like we were championing these sort of more affordable watches, and we still do, but we've obviously expanded our price point. And like, I think as time has gone on, like on a personal level, the thing I think I feel most self-conscious about is that like my tastes and my ability to acquire watches has gone beyond that sort of very affordable range. And like, when you own a watch that costs a few $1,000s, especially coming from that place, like I just, in my mind, I'm like, I feel like a chump. Like I feel like a bit of a sellout and a bit of a like bougie jerk, you know what I mean? And I think and I don't think that's right, but that's something that I've sort of like struggled with for a long time as Zach and I have just progressed in our careers, and you're able to afford slightly nicer things. It's like I at times do feel a little self-conscious, like I'm abandoning that ethos, even though I know very well that the company is not. But it's definitely something I feel very self-conscious about. And I think part of that is that watches are so obviously this luxury item. Whereas I think a lot of other folks who might be into like collecting records, like you could amass a $20,000 record collection, and that, but someone might not necessarily see that and perceive it as this like, oh, you've got, all this money, or you have all these means to acquire these luxury items. But yeah, I don't know. It's just something that I find that over the years I've sort of felt very self-conscious about. I don't know, Zach, if you feel the same way, but it's certainly something I think about.
Certainly. Especially since like it kind of tends to happen in leaps, not it's like not like a $500 per watch increase over like the course of 20 years. It's like, I went from spending $6,000 to like 16 on something, but hey, I don't have kids and I don't have many expenses, and I can spend my money stupidly if I wish to. So
but hold on, let's unpack that for 1 second, because
I don't have other responsibilities. I can be irresponsible is how I like to. Probably that's the best way to phrase it.
But even then, I would push back on like what is responsible. I'm air quoting that word, and what is affordable in watches. You think about like food, right? And I know it's different, but when you think of, because sometimes I'll be like, oh man, like I'm broke, or I'm not rich, or I want to have this, or like there's always someone who has more, and in many cases there's always someone who has less. To where like I was like, oh, I think I'm like coffee rich, in the sense that like I can go out, and if I didn't plan on buying a coffee, that doesn't matter. I can still go buy the coffee, and the coffee can cost whatever the coffee costs, and I can get it. And like that's a level of like wealth and affluence that I probably like take for granted. But some folks might be like, oh, that's super irresponsible, because you should make your own coffee. And then if you don't, if you make your own coffee and you're not spending whatever at Starbucks, or some sort of bullshit like Warren Buffett line where he like, because he's drinking
Republican avocado toast thing.
Exactly. And it's like, oh, and then that allows you to do this, and that allows you to do this. But I think the biggest thing is like, instead of like making excuses for whether or not you live irresponsibly, to quote you,
to quote me,
where it's
manifestation of my guilt for having something is that I'm balancing it as this would be irresponsible for other people, but I see what you're saying.
But I think like at the end of the day, like it doesn't, unless you're saying like, hey, please criticize how I live and how I spend based on all these, like it just shouldn't fucking matter. Like at the end of the day, it shouldn't matter. Like people should be judged on how you treat others and how you behave in your in your life. So like, and I think that's a tough thing, where sometimes when judgment becomes really quick and it becomes easier to do that, and that's now everyone's defense mechanism, it doesn't become like, well, wait, sure, I've done dumb things. I've said stupid things online. I've done, I'm very, I admit that, but like at the same time, it doesn't mean that who that person is. And I don't say like, oh, boo-hoo, woe is me, but it's just like where everything is so quick. Even people like Ben Clymer of Hodinkee, like my heart breaks for the amount of bizarro stuff that people come after him because he's driving a car right now, or golfing, or whatever that is, where it's like, oh, he should be doing this, or like that person owes you. And I think the biggest thing is it's also a very common thing amongst people who start at a specific level. And so, say like Worn and Wound or Hodinkee or any watch site, a lot of the community that is attached to the early stages of fill in the blank company, when that company grows, if the community doesn't grow at the identical, socioeconomic state as everyone else, there's a frustration all of a sudden, like any menswear community where all of a sudden a guy starts wearing bespoke and he's wearing some other thing. People are like, well, you probably suck, or you're probably, it's, there's something in there. And I think at the end of the day, there's an envy, and what ends up happening is it messes with that person's head, and like people just can't live their life. Like if you want to buy a $30,000 watch and you have the money and you want to do the watch, buy the $30,000 watch. Who cares?
Oh yeah, no, I will. It's not hard for me to do it. But yeah, just to Blake's point, I might not flaunt it quite yet, but maybe I just should just own up to the new me. You know what I mean?
Well,
Yeah.
that's okay. I just kind of also, and someone's going to be like, oh, Jeremy, you totally got all these things wrong. But like, why can't we champion people who we think are doing a good job and be happy when people are doing well? And I think it's just with the wealth gap growing so big, anyone who's different, because I'll be like, man, that person's so rich and they have this and this. And it's like, well, I can get a coffee anytime I want.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's still wealth. Like I'm not getting bombed. I have plenty of clothes. I have fast internet, and I mean, I don't know. You fill in the blank of shit.
I like that not getting bombed and having fast internet are sort of at the same
right.
level.
I know it's so
same
stupid.
place on the pyramid.
Yeah.
No, but I think that like from personal experience, my upbringing and my background, like my family had no money, and kind of like there was no excess wealth for me growing up or within my family. And like, I definitely had a ton of resentment for people with money growing up. And it's not right. I'm the first to acknowledge that was really childish and petty, but like, that's just honestly how I felt. Mm-hmm. And I think an interesting experience as I get older, and also just the folks that I grew up with, like, I can't, like, I don't know, I'm not really connected.
Where'd you grow up?
I grew up with in New Jersey, like a small town in New Jersey. But like the experience of, for example, like working with Zach and our business partner, James, and like some people in my family who have like, started to achieve at a higher level and sort of make some money. Like, it's the first time that I've seen people sort of start to get to a higher level of income, and I'm like proud for them and I'm excited for them. Like, at no point if Zach walks in with like a cool watch, am I like, oh, Zach, you jerk. Like, I'm just like, oh, that's so cool that.
Just wait until next week.
Yeah. Fair enough. But you know what I mean? Like, it's been a different experience. I don't know. I think that I've sort of, maybe that's a maturation. I don't know what it is, but like, I don't know. And I think that my concern about it, like, I realized that I said I feel like a bit of a sellout, but it's almost not even to the people outside of my life. It's more just to the people in my life and to myself. Like, like buying, like early this summer, I bought a Batman, and like, I bought it at retail, but it's still a significant amount of money. And the process of doing that felt absurd and like not something that I've gotten used to. You know what I mean? I mean, I'm proud of myself for being able to achieve that, but it's still, there's something that's still on a personal level feels somewhat uncomfortable about it. And I don't think it's right for people to judge people for that stuff, but I can't quite shake it myself. I don't know if that's a good or a bad thing.
Well, I mean, it's like a natural defense thing that I was saying. Like, it's very quick for me or anyone else to say, oh, this person has this watch. They may be this person. They may be this kind of person. Like, I mean, it's I don't know, some Freudian thing where it's like, okay, you went to this school, you must behave this way. You went to this, it's like how all of us try to size each other up. And it's definitely really unfortunate of just stereotypes in general. But I think like that's the tough part. And I've talked about this on the pod before, where especially because like I grew up in a similar background to where anything nice I ever got, because of the background that I had socioeconomically, I felt like I had to know everything about it to justify my ownership of it, right? Like I had to be like, well, sure, it's okay that I have this Rolex or this watch, but I have it because I'm actually like a really big fan, and I know all this stuff about it. Like I can tell you the reference number and what it is, and if it's like, well, why do I need to have all that knowledge to just exist and own something? And I mean, that's more of a conversation for my therapist, which I won't put you through. But.
Yeah, I know. I'm a group therapy session now, but but yeah, I totally get what Blake is saying too, and I think it is, because this wasn't like a quick thing for us either to get to a point where we can buy these watches. Like, it's been a decade of at times kind of excruciating work and at times kind of like tough times, like I can remember also being saddled in debt and selling off basically my entire collection not that long ago. So it's a little bit like to that, who that guy was, like it just feels like, it's a little bit of like, it's me questioning myself too. I'm like, am I making the smart decision knowing what that is like too? Because I've been there not that long ago, wow, this is good therapy. I think I just had a breakthrough.
Yeah. See, like, there you go.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think that's the funniest thing is like, and I don't know, no one needs therapy more than adults, and especially adults that end up finding their way with various items of value, I don't know. I mean, I think it's just a natural thing, but in a way, like that's kind of my favorite thing about watches, and also things like to be honest with like Worn and Wound, where it's not so much about own this so you are this type of person, and I mean, I think a lot of like watch sites have kind of backed down from it, but from traditional luxury journalism, like to kind of air quote that word, so much of it is selling it to you because now your life is complete, and even like watch companies where it's like, you need this, so you're not a good dad unless you own a Patek Philippe to give to your son. Like, why the fuck is that like such a mindset? Even myself, like I've been brainwashed by it. It's like, why do I need to have this thing? And like, oh, I can justify my ownership because I'm going to give it to my son. Like, there's not really, it doesn't matter if I'm a shitty dad or whatever, like I'm just.
Yeah. Well,
I don't know.
That whole sort of creation myth of the watch collector of like, well, first of all, it assumes that you're a man on some respect because it's always like a grandfather or a dad passing on to their son. But also like as somebody who didn't have a dad or like a grandfather that he had a relationship with, like I never got a watch. So am I not allowed to be like an authentic watch person? Like, what's that about? You know what I mean? Like it just feels very gatekeepy in this sort of like creepy kind of elitist way. And that never felt comfortable, I think, to either Zach or me, right? I mean,
yeah, for sure.
Was that like, I mean, maybe this, you don't have to reveal this if you don't want to, but like when you guys were making Worn and Wound, did you have like, hey, here are our core principles, like we're never going to be this, or we're all, or was it just like it just happened more naturally?
I mean, it happened naturally initially because it was very much a response to like where we were in our lives, which was that the extra money we had to spend on watches was in the realm of $100, $200 here and there. There just wasn't thousands of dollars or anything like that at the time. So it was very practical because it was very, it was for us. We wrote it for us,
Right.
We were our own best customers initially. But then like, as we sort of, I think, expanded and sort of mined what was out there and what we were doing and what it meant to people and sort of what the niche was that we had sort of fallen into. I think we set up some principles for ourselves. We didn't necessarily announce them out, but there were sort of, maybe there was price caps or like certain styles of things we were talking about. And, I would say in retrospect, like, I understand why we did that, but like, it isn't ever helpful to set up restrictions like that. I think for my recommendation to small business, like, be flexible kind of a thing. Like, I think we might have been a little bit stubborn initially, which wasn't helpful. And, 10 years later, there's still relationships we are working on that we probably should have had by now, kind of a thing.
Yeah. I think early on also, like, none of it was formal. But I feel like early on, Zach and I, and then James, when he joined on with us, like, we were very much on the same page about, like, we're not really interested in celebrity endorsements, especially when our bandwidth was really low for how much content we could create. I feel like for a long time, we're just like, we will not write press release posts. Like, we're either writing a thoughtful piece about something or a hands-on review, or it's not getting written about, which again, sort of to your point, Zach, about like maturing and sort of developing, like we had this, back in the day, we had this very anti like press release post perspective, which now obviously we embrace as like, that's news that people
about that. How do we plan on running the site again? That was great.
Yeah. No, it was like, we literally were like, we will not write a regurgitation of a press release, which is not to say at all what we're doing. That's what we're doing now. But like, we understand now that people come to us for news. So when we get a release about a new watch, we want to write about it. But yeah, no, we had certain sort of like core principles of like, that felt very anti, to your point, like traditional luxury journalism.
Yeah. It was also at the time, I mean, it was like looking at what magazines did, or, the print world. And it was definitely a little bit different than, I mean, the landscape was wildly different then than it is now. So just like the style of how people were writing about watches has changed so much. It's that old style is probably even going to come back because just like the cycle of all these things. But yeah, there was definitely, now that you mentioned the press release thing, there was a little bit of like a copy and paste sort of mentality at some of the like more traditional outlets that were sort of figuring out what this internet was about. And we were like, well, that's not us. We're like, it has to be editorialized, it has to be thoughtful, or it has to be something else,
Yeah, I mean, I know sites like Selectism, which is not a site anymore, so I don't mind saying it. Like, that was usually the biggest criticism they would get, is because a lot of this wasn't watches, this was clothes. It was just literally, Hypebeast still does this, to where it's just a press release regurgitation. And I think it's also where it feels like, and maybe you guys would feel the same way, but it feels like at that time, sites were, it was all about how many visitors you had, and you were able to get more visitors by just having more stuff. And so people would just post whatever. Like, I remember, like, I was working for a company and we were like, hey, let's see if we can get one of our things in Hypebeast. And so we just wrote a press release and we purposely put typos in it to see if they were just going to copy it. And they did.
Yeah.
But it was like, oh, it's because you're just taking whatever it is and you're just throwing it on there. Like, you just, okay, let's copy this, let's put it on there. Because in some cases, the only way you were going to survive is if you had, 1 million visitors or whatever that week. But I feel like now, because there's so many different outlets and there's so many different ways to connect and engage with brands, media, it doesn't really matter how many posts go up a day. No? Or do you disagree?
I think it's a balance. I think volume certainly helps, especially when there's sort of quality things to go into that pipeline.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, we definitely, I mean, almost by nature of the fact that from the very beginning of Worn and Wound, we understood very quickly that like what we wanted to write about was not going to be the thing that got a ton of eyeballs. Like when Worn and Wound didn't even mention the word Rolex for the first 5 years, like you're not getting any of that SEO. You're not getting any of those clicks or that search traffic.
Shit.
So like we from the very beginning were sort of embracing of just like what we want to write about isn't the thing that's going to just automatically get people to come to the site. We're really going to have to produce great content that convinces enthusiasts and people who care to like come to the site, read, and sort of be sticky, you know? So that's, and I think that's always carried through the website. Even now that we're producing a lot more content, it's always about producing content that we think gives people a reason to come back, not just the content, not just the product itself or whatever the case may be.
Right. No, exactly. I mean, that makes perfect sense. I especially with, you know, like, I don't know, the whole quality over quantity, method. I mean, yeah. But I think that the other thing that happened too, when, you know, because Worn and Wound for me, it was like, oh, I can go here and I can learn about watches that I can afford versus things that were just pipe dreams. And even then, I think like how some of this stuff was written on like other magazines or whatever, it felt like that person didn't really totally know, or it was just they went on a press trip or something like that. And then you guys launch Wind Up. And I feel like that's where, at least for a lot of other folks, including myself, it was really a rocket ship for that. So like how does that relationship work? Because you have a store, you have Wind Up, you have Worn and Wound. Yeah.
Sure.
Sorry. I'm just curious how that works.
No, do you want me to take a stab at this one, Zach?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. You know, internally how it works is things are pretty separated. Like certainly the shop and the event team, I think, are more closely related to one another than editorial, but editorial very much sort of functions on its own. But, you know, we were talking about, we kind of were recapping with the team recently about Wind Up New York, which, you know, recently ended and was, you know, by far the biggest Wind Up we've ever thrown. And, you know, we've always felt like we're the biggest consumer watch event in America. And that one really felt like it. Like it felt like this, you know, big event. And I think I think
you are the biggest consumer watch event in America, at least.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's safe to say that at this point, you know. But what I was saying to the folks here, like Wind Up from the beginning was always more than just like this event that sort of makes money by, you know, selling booths to brands. It was about sort of being this sort of physical manifestation of our community and of everything that we kind of stand for, and sort of, you know, like I was saying before about our content or the things we wanted to write about not really being sort of the super mainstream. You know, when you have a physical event that's really popular like that, it kind of forces the people who might not be giving you the credit or sort of paying attention to you, it sort of forces them to pay attention. And I think that's what Wind Up has been a big piece of it for us from the beginning. So that's not like really answering the question of how it necessarily works, all three. But I think for us, you know, the blog does such a good job of bringing so many people to the community. I mean, it is the sort of heart of the community. But, you know, I think Wind Up, the fair, is sort of that physical kind of, you can't avoid it manifestation. I know, Zach, if that resonates with you.
Yeah, definitely. It's such an interesting event and experience for us, because it's like, yeah, I mean, it puts a face to the community in a very literal and real way that you can, it's very easy to sort of forget about who it is that's reading the site, who it is that we're creating all this content for and what it means to them. Because like, yeah, you get comments here and there, but they're usually just about the watch, you know, it's people just engaging. And it's not really about the organization, you know, but we go to Wind Up Watch Fair and people, they want to let us know how important it is to them about like what the event means to them and what Worn and Wound means to them, and the podcast and all the things we do, what it means to them in their lives, and how, you know, it's become an important part of their lives. And watches, you know, it is a community. Like if you get it far enough into the hobby that you are reading a dedicated website to it, like it means more to you than just another product. Like, you know, for me, my cell phone means nothing to me other than a way to play games and communicate to other people. But I'm sure to a lot of people, there's a community there, and that's you know, that's the separation. It's that you don't have to get into everything, but if you've gotten this far, you're really into it, and it's important. And yeah, it's just like meeting people and talking to them about watches and seeing just how, I don't know, it's sort of, I feel like I'm gushing now, but it's just sort of like, it really makes it real for us too, because it's like, a lot of times we look at graphs and numbers and we see it go up, we see it go down, we see what article did well, what article didn't do well, which brands are, you know, it's all this stuff, but it's like, it doesn't matter. The community's really there and they really enjoy what we're doing and it's really meaningful to them. And like, it just, the event puts that into focus. And this event, to Blake's point, was like, it had just had the fit and finish I think we've always dreamed about for Wind Up, that just took years to kind of get to and build up to and build our team up enough to kind of get there, to where like now this this felt like an event that, if the watch industry isn't noticing it, it's because they're choosing not to, and a brand that isn't necessarily participating or doesn't want to is I think needs to evaluate then what kind of community they're trying to access and what their goals are in community outreach. Because I would go so far as to say the future of watch collecting is in the room at Wind Up Watch Fair. It's, at least for the US, and if we can get out sometime, but no promises.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that the other thing too, where it's like for a lot of people, they're hesitant to get into watches because one, they feel not worthy enough to like go to an AD, right? I mean, I think that there's a mindset of like, oh, I'm not welcome here, or maybe I shouldn't be allowed at this place, or I can't afford these things, or and they're not going to have anything I want anyway. And so there ends up becoming this big gap between the biggest watch companies that are just gonna kind of always be there, like the Rolexes and stuff. But then you have all these other smaller companies, or the people call them micro brands now. I don't even know if that's PC. I don't know, whatever. A smaller, newer brand where they're going to do really well, but they only exist online because they don't have the capital to be in the traditional authorized dealer sort of landscape. And so there's this serious hole within the market of folks who want to have a deep relationship with the brands that they patronize. They want to actually physically see something. They want to be in a welcoming environment and around other people who are just, if anything, going to kind of gas them up more to get whatever they're going to get, right? And so it's kind of surprising that none of this stuff existed for as long as we've been, there were watch meetups. There's like that Vegas jeweler show, but that's kind of toxic. I went there once. It was nuts. It was just people hawking stuff out of Ziploc bags, like it was, but this just didn't really exist at all. And now people are going and they're like checking out like Manta, and they're checking out, brands that are not gargantuan, but make really good product, and you can get it and you can touch it and you can feel it and you can actually see if it does make sense for you.
Totally.
100%.
Yeah. I think, to your point about it not existing, I think it's honestly something that we thought about and talk about too. I think that, the whole idea of doing it came from us sort of going to events like Pop-Up Flea and American Field and just...
Oh shit, yeah, Pop-Up Flea.
Yeah, like,
don't
forget Pop-Up Flea.
There.
Yeah, like we attended as vendors and also as patrons, and like literally, the decision to do Wind Up came in a cab ride home from Pop-Up Flea, and we were just like, this has to happen for watches, because we would go, they would always do it in Manhattan, and we would go.
Yeah.
We'd usually be like the only watch thing there, and at the time, all we were really selling was accessories, and like we would be one of the busiest booths there, and we would sell stuff all weekend long to people with Speedmasters and subs and and also more affordable watches. And it was just like and they wanted to talk about watches. They didn't just want to get a strap, they wanted to talk watches. And it was like, there's a community of people here. They just don't get to go to an event like this.
It was actually, and not to gloat, but there'd be times when we'd go to that event, especially the later years when it was at like there's some kind of strange venues it was at, and like some of the other vendors did not have a good time, and they'd be kind of, you could tell they weren't selling and they were kind of pissed off, and we'd be happy as clams or whatever the expression is, and we'd be selling, we had people coming out, and it was like we had a totally different experience than the rest of them, and it was because we had a community, and and like watches, people love watches. Sorry, that was it.
Yeah.
No, I mean it's true, and I totally forgot about the Pop-Up Flea, because that was Randy Goldberg, Michael Williams, Randy Goldberg now of Bombas, Michael Williams of ACL, and because that was the thing for menswear of all these smaller brands, that people had read some editorial about quaddy moccasins, right? Or like how cool they were. But people were like, well, I don't really know how they fit. Are they really going to feel like that? Is it? So there was just, I think the concept of pop-ups in general were still very, very new, versus now it feels like any new DTC brand will do a pop-up in New York with like a pink wall and, an Instagram selfie mirror. And like, that's a thing. But with watches, I think the thing I wanted to discuss too, it's like the amount of time it takes for most people to buy a watch. Like, it's a very long purchase period. And especially people that are buying watches, serial researching, watching reviews, going on YouTube, watching multiple reviews for the same watch from like different people, where like at the end of the day, all it does is fucking tell you what time it is. Like, but like people really getting nitty gritty, measuring things to the microns and all that. And it just didn't exist to just go and find these things in person. I don't know. Yeah. No, it's kind of like a duh moment. Sorry, I'm like processing this at the same time.
No, I think that, I think that part of what works about it, and part of of what I think we're reaping the benefit of a little bit as a business, as now that we're, 11 whatever years into it, is that to build the community, I think to make something like that viable took a really long time of not making money and working really hard and like, frankly eating shit. So like, not to...
How many years were you doing it before this last one? 5?
Doing wind up, like how long would we be doing it?
Yeah, sorry.
So like 7 years, but there was a couple pandemic years in there.
Right.
So, the event had been building for, about 5-6 practical years. But even before that, just building Worn and Wound and the community through the website like that, that is the primary driver of kind of getting people out to the event. But and certainly over the last 10 years, and Zach can talk about this too, like the sort of, as you call it, micro brand, small independent watch community has grown so much and has become so much more sophisticated. It's a totally different ballgame now.
Well, I mean, I think that's also thanks to like Worn and Wound too, of being a platform where that stuff really flourishes and can exist.
Yeah.
Attention! Do you even loop wheel, bro? Do you know what loop wheel garments are? Look, I actually didn't, honestly. I was just like, oh, it's a flex, or it's this special kind of cotton. But no. The folks at Standard & Strange dropped a ton of incredible knowledge bombs and their incredible loop wheel tee, made in Japan, of course. Back to loop wheel. It's an antique circular knitting machine that relies on gravity and uses spring-bearded needles. What the heck? Do you even get it? Look, all you need to know is it's dope. It's better. If you want to learn more, visit standardandstrange.com/loop wheel and check out their new loop wheel tees. Your boy is partial to yellow because, duh. But the tees are fire no matter what color. The fit is spot on, and it's a classic tee that looks like it's from every era, to be honest with you, and fits like a dream. And it's from the folks at Standard & Strange, the shop that helps you own fewer, better things, run by industry vets who are focused on incredible product from incredible vendors. And look, if that's not your vibe, check out some of their huge offerings of Japanese denim or boots. But listen, the shirts, fam, the shirts. So, if you want to know more, visit standardandstrange.com. Loop wheel, baby. That's standardandstrange.com. Here's the thing, which is funny. You guys must have seen my notes. People talk about the metaverse like it's this new thing we're all going to go and hang out. And what I think it really is it's not us putting on VR headsets and going to comedy clubs or even playing video games together. I think it's just people embracing communities and that being a norm. Do you guys remember the Elks Club or have you ever heard of them?
Well, you drive by them in towns, the old Elks Lodge. Yeah, okay. Yeah.
I went to a charity event for my cousin's or my brother-in-law's nephew for whatever. And I was it was at an Elks Lodge. And I was oh, and it's I forgot, before the internet, people would just go and meet up and hang out and play games and do these things. And now it's kind of happened, but we're all kind of masked behind the internet. And then you have these other people on another, world saying oh, we're going to do this metaverse where it's going to be digital. And it's I think, isn't the metaverse now just people that are fans of stuff and that publicly go and engage in it? Isn't the metaverse just people that go to Wind Up or people that go to Blammo events and take pictures of their shoes? Is that the metaverse?
Yeah. Well, I it's funny. I think Zach and I are kind of metaverse haters. We're both
uh-oh.
We're I don't know. I think we're very skeptical of it. But hearing you talk about it just now, I think the parallel to me is, people have come to Worn and Wound events, private events or to Wind Up and said oh, I never felt comfortable going to a watch event, but this feels really comfortable to me. Or I got into watches through the website and now I feel comfortable doing it. And one really cool thing I could see about the metaverse is when stripped of all of the preconceived notions of who you are, what you look like,
yes,
how much money you have, it's oh, I can go to this thing because no one really knows what I look like, and I can just be accepted for who I am and engage in this thing. So
you don't have your NFT whatever entry passcode.
That's true.
So they figured that out before they had the metaverse working. They figured out how to make it exclusive.
Yeah,
isn't that good?
That's actually okay. That's a very good point. Yeah. Okay. Fair.
I just I'm not opposed to any of it, but until we're at Ready Player One, Ghost in the Shell level, full immersion, just don't bother me
won't happen.
Well, then I'm sorry.
But the thing is, I think what people really want is happening. And I think it's a place where you can go that's separate from your normal day to day, and you can go and you can be yourself. I mean, this is the same equivalent, you could argue, is a bar or an old school British club or any of these things. I think it's just all of a sudden putting the label on it, like air quote, like a metaverse. It's like, no, like people that love watches that maybe have a lot of money, maybe don't have money. It doesn't matter what they have or what they wear or how they look. They're just here to learn and get excited. I mean, Red Bar was kind of like that. I mean, I've only been to one Red Bar event, and I've been, I don't know anything that may or may not be happening. So like whatever, but like, it feels like that's kind of where we've graduated to on these, especially as adults. Like that's the big thing, is saying as an adult.
It's really just, I mean, I think it just highlights what a sad state of the world, like it's internet technologies have kind of brought us to, which is, that, I mean, like it's so hard. There's a conversation with my girlfriend all the time. Like, it's so hard to make new friends these days because you're just isolated, and it is weird. Or like the fact that we're talking about this basic concept of like a social group, which at some point was very normal. Like you would have, your various, your groups, whatever they were, like they existed and they were formalized and they were out there. Or it was weird to go hang out in a bar. Like that seems like to say like, oh, I go hang out at my local bar every night. People would be like, oh, that sounds strange, Zach. It's, but
maybe you have a problem, sort of thing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But it's like, maybe you're going there for trivia and to meet people, I don't do that. I'm not that social. I mean, social because of the internet. But, I was just thinking, like, Jeremy, I don't know if you want to admit to this, but you and I have been known to play a certain video game at the same time.
I will totally admit to it. I play video games. I'm 37 years old, and I clock a good 2 to 3 hours of video games late at night. That's how I unwind.
Well, so I play this game, and the funniest thing with this game, it's Destiny 2.
Destiny 2.
It's open world, and it's social in a way. You can see the other people around you from wherever they are in the world. You play missions with them. Like, it is almost impossible to communicate to them. So you're just mute figures running around, bumping into each other, shooting stuff, killing them, doing this thing you have in common, and yet you're incapable of actually meeting them. It's disturbing. Anyway, I think we should get back to more social groups, and we should make friends. And I would be down to, Red Bar's a great example. Blake and I both started going to Red Bar many years ago, 9 years ago. It was like early days of Worn and Wound. Red Bar was quite small still at the time. It was very much like a tight-knit group of New York collectors, kind of before it went into its, through social media, branching out into, I don't know what you call it, like the satellites that it has all around the world now. And I've made good friends back then that are still friends to this day. And because you met over common interests, and then you found out you had other common interests, and, it's what making friends is I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
it's crazy.
But I think, I don't know if you noticed this, but every single thing that we've tried to explain in this conversation, we've also tried to explain a reason for the explanation. Mm-hmm. Like, well, but let me put an asterisk on this and let me explain why I'm saying it this way. Or whether I'm, because I feel like just liking something and having that end and not justifying why you like something or why you want to do something is kind of where we've also graduated to in the state of the internet world. Where if you say you like watches, you're giving 5 or 10 different reasons why, so you can justify that reason to someone else. If you say you're playing video games, you're saying, well, but we really do these and these things, versus, yes, I play video games at night, or yes, like, you know what I mean? Like, this entire conversation has consisted of that, of just being like, well, but also.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
Well, I feel like, we, again, like, here at the company, like, we talk about kind of community and how we want to kind of foster community and how we want to connect people. And obviously, the event is a big piece, and, we're on social media and all that kind of stuff. But like, it all feels incredibly siloed. And we have thought about like, oh, should we like build a community of people, like build an app or whatever? And it's just not something we've wanted to do, partially because it's just another silo of people that like are separated from everybody else. And in my mind, it comes back to like, I think the idea of a social network is really appealing. It's just in practice, it never is something that I personally want to participate in. But just sort of that free flowing of like, this is who I am, this is what I'm interested in, take it or leave it. If you're also interested in Destiny 2, like, let's chat and sort of like connect. Same thing with watches, whereas like in practicality, it's like on Instagram, there's actually just like a very sort of gatekeeped community of watch people that are going to jump down your throat if you say the wrong thing. So it's like, I don't know how you get around that. I don't know.
Well, and W. David Marks wrote this book, Status and Culture, recently, and he explains a lot about how us as humans have looked at and appreciate status, culture, blah, 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 and like what that means and how we've gotten through social hierarchies and what was cool and how we chase these and how these trends evolved. And it does feel like, I mean, I'm not going to like spoil the book or anything, but we're also at this part where people ascend status now through takedowns of other status norms, right? Like that's not everyone, but the watch world, all of a sudden someone gets all of this respect because they just wrote a takedown of Panerai, or they just wrote, and here's the thing, maybe they're totally justified and the stuff that they have is true, and way to go that they just found out some whatever. But at the same time, we've kind of evolved to this level of, status where you ascend that by showing how you're actually above it. Well, you know what? I don't really collect Rolex. You know what I do collect is Frankenweilers. What are those? Oh, well, you've never heard of it. Sorry, you probably don't know. You've never heard of these watches. So like
freshman year in college indie music conversations.
Yes.
Oh man.
Yeah, I'm into
that people would share. Ugh,
yeah. I'm into this noise bop, which only one syllable is understandable, but we're all kind of in this, and I feel like there's still a lot of communities have that as a part of their backbone. I mean, and I don't know. And I think it's like, how do you have communities? How do you let the communities grow, but also be mindful of the bad vibes, for lack of better term?
Well, I think, it's hard. I feel like any community that centers around collecting or obtaining things, whether it's cars or watches or records or whatever the case may be, like at the end of the day, it feels like it's going to boil down to exclusivity, rarity, sort of how hard was it to find that thing, who has that one specific make and model of that car, like that, status and I think scarcity are always going to be connected, I feel like, and in these sort of niche communities. And I think with watches, especially with the vintage watch craze, like it just got accelerated so fast because it was just like, well, did you get your Tudor Snowflake before they became unobtainable? Like, how sick is that? And it's like, well, you were just the guy that was there in the room at that point. You know what I mean? Like, there's nothing really special about you. And the other thing that I think is so funny is like about the status thing is, from back in the day, going to watch meetups and stuff like that of all types. I always have thought it was hysterical how all these people who are so obsessed with status and oftentimes have tremendous means and have achieved amazing things in their personal lives to get them incredible wealth, at the end of the day, all want to have the same thing. They all want to sit in a room and be like, I have my sub and I have my Speedmaster and I have my this and my that. And it's like, originality is not the status symbol. Like,
that's for sure.
Oh, right.
Collecting the thing.
Yeah, I mean,
status symbol.
I need these Rolexes. I need the Nautilus. I need the Daytona. Because it also.
I was just saying, it always drove us all up the wall when you'd read or see somebody say somewhere like every collector needs to have a meter's first sub or something. It's like, you don't. Period. End of story.
And it's always so much more impressive to meet somebody who's like super into watch collecting, and then you see what's on their wrist, and it's totally left field. It's not the thing that you're sort of expecting them to have. At least personally, that's how I feel. Like if somebody has like a truly unique collection, or like if you ever go to like sometimes, not to put him on blast, but like Bill Yao from Mark II, he'll do these like meetups with his collectors, and like the guys there will have like cases and cases of this very specific reference of this military watch, and it's like, now there's somebody who just like is really on their own wavelength. You know what I mean? Like that's a watch collector
right,
who's like really into something unique and into it because that's what they're into. And like, sometimes you go to these meetups and it's just like, I'm not impressed that you have the same $50,000 watch that the guy next to you has. I don't know.
But like, that's the thing too, is where then it becomes, well, I got to have these things that no one know about. And then the people that have the watches that are more expensive. So it's like, it's a lose-lose situation. And it's like, maybe if we just stop judging anyone on what they have and just being okay with whatever they do or don't have. And the fact that we're there is enough. Like, that's it.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I think in an ideal world, that is like like you asked if we had like values at Worn and Wound early on.
Yeah.
Like that's high on the list these days. It's like, it's a come as you are, be into what you're into. Status because of what you own is just not a concept that we buy into, and I'd much rather talk to somebody who's just like fascinated by something because that's what fascinates them rather than because it's what the community told them they're supposed to like.
Yeah. I mean, I'm really glad we've kind of like gone there, because I feel like in most cases, especially with watches or any object or anything that people are a fan of, the reason why someone likes something for me is more interesting than what they like, and how they want to, even when you're just trying to be different, like that's fine. Like, sure, there's some other onion we can peel here, but like I think that's actually what gives me the joy to like continue, and that is I'm gonna learn something. I'm gonna get excited about, and I can exist, in whatever world I have to be this person. I have to be, John the banker or the guy who works here or whatever. But in this other place, hear me out here, metaverse, I can just be a watch fan, and I can like these watches and I can get into them, and that can be a thing. Because otherwise, if it was in the 1950s, it would be someone who's like working on a car in their garage.
For sure. Yeah, this conversation just makes me think a lot about this guy on our team, Patrick. He's our videographer, and he just like he just is he's one of those people I feel like very much marches to the beat of his own drum, and it's very much true with his watch collecting. He's been on the podcast a bunch of times recently, and I feel like people have really started to get a taste for the fact that he just kind of is into what he's into because it's what he likes. And I think his new kick, Zach, correct me if I'm wrong, is that he's really focused on like he wants to have an all quartz collection, like an all high accuracy quartz collection, which is just like how many people do you meet at a random meetup who are that's their perspective, But yeah,
is he just gonna have Grand Seikos then? I mean, I'm not trying to make fun of it, like, because I'm trying to think what other high-end quartz.
There's a handful of HAQ out there. There's not a lot, but I actually there was a really cool one that came up from this brand. This company Time Factors in England made a watch under their sub-brand Precista, I believe it is, and they made this really cool chronograph that uses this ETA. This is getting real nerdy real fast. This ETA chronograph quartz movement that has a central minute counter, like some of the old chronographs like Lemani 5100, which just nobody uses. Like, I don't know if brands just don't have the imagination to use it, or they don't think people will understand it, but it's an awesome movement and people should use it. Anyway, they used it, and they used an HAQ version. It's like accurate within 10 seconds a year. And him and I were going back and forth and talking. I was just like, you have seen this, right? And he's like, no, what are you talking about? And I sent it to him, and he bought it by the end of the day. He just like was so obsessed with it. He was sending me he found it on eBay, he found it here. Because then he got obsessed with the right bezel, and it just became a whole thing. But he has it, and it's cool, very cool.
Yeah.
I mean, to be honest, I would love to just have high accuracy quartz watches, because then I have a drawer over here filled with, whatever watches, and the amount of time it takes for me to get it on, set it up. Then because I'm an idiot, I go and I make sure it's synced up correctly, so I want it to be as accurate as I can from when I put it on, and I'll even be the guy who like goes and gets his date correct, all that stuff. But it's like, if you have
wait, that's a weird thing to have your date correct?
Well, I mean, there used to be a joke where it's like, what, like, you're around a watch collector because none of their dates are correct on their watches because they're just switching it up all the time. But
not to be an elitist, but those sound like fools. You always have to set your date. Jeez.
That's like a layer of level of disorganization I don't think I can handle.
Yeah, I mean, but like, if you have quartz watches, you put them away, and then you get your other one, and and it's always the right time.
Yeah, I don't have too many I wear currently, but I have like a really nice Sin I got recently. There's an EZM2, which is like this vintage Sin diver that's filled with oil, so it can like dive to like 5,000 meters, something crazy like that. So it feels like there's nothing inexpensive feeling about this watch. It is solid as a rock, and it's I don't think it's high accuracy quartz because of when it was made, as in the 90s, but it keeps good time, and it's like, it's nice that I can just grab it and throw it on. It really is. Don't have to think about it at all. Meanwhile, I'm also wearing an Apple Watch, which tells the time, but whatever, screw that.
I have an Apple Watch on a wrist, and then I'll wear another watch on another wrist when I'm, at home or doing stuff. Especially because I'm like anyone else, I'm like into the data and the convenience, and I'll go on my walks, or I'll do whatever I'm doing at the gym in the morning, and it's like, it's kind of nice to have that on there. And I also think it's fine to own it. Like, fuck it. I don't need to explain why I like this watch. There it is. I got it. If you're wearing two watches, wear two watches.
When I can afford like a Christian Vanderclaw or something that can tell me the weather for the next week, as well as the moon phase and all this other stuff, maybe I'll switch. But until then, like, I love all the data that's on here. Like you're saying, it's really like my watch is a little station. It's neat. My Apple Watch.
Yeah.
I hate that I like it so much. I really do.
Coming to terms. Yeah, the biggest thing is like, you're stuck.
Yeah, I can never go back.
That's my only gripe with it. Is once you get it and you do get into all the data and it's at your fingertips, and you can then mess around with that data. And like, I was like, I want to see how I'm sleeping. What are my sleep cycles? Like, I have a 4-month-old. They're not good. I don't need to know anything else. But I like, in my head, I'm like, I want to find out, like, should I go to bed at 11:37 today instead of 12:02 because I'm going to get more REM stuff? I mean, that's just me being a nerd, but like, yeah.
Well, thank goodness that the case protection thing has not made its way to watches. I mean, it's kind of funny that like we all
It has with Apple Watches.
Oh, do you put like
You
covers
mean like
on it now?
surrounding things?
Yeah.
Yeah, I've seen people that have these like G-Shock-esque cases around their Apple Watch.
So
Okay.
there is a brand that has made those for Rolex GMTs at the very least. I've occasionally seen this on Instagram, but I don't remember what they're called. Honestly, I think it looks kind of
for your watch.
Yeah, it's like the kind of rubbery seal thing that would go over the whole watch, protect it.
Well,
I mean,
like-
naturally, the watch community thinks that's ridiculous and absurd.
Yeah.
but,
Oh my God! I just looked this up.
Well, maybe this is like a business idea, but like, do you know the phone skin brand D brand? Like they're like the big phone skin brand that everybody advertises online. You know, they've got a factory somewhere with a laser printer and they just print these like perfectly sized panels for your phone. If someone came to me and said, "Hey, I can give you a camo carbon fiber, perfectly cut skin to put on your GMT," I'm there. Like,
So you're saying
Really?
watch wraps,
Watch
like literally
wraps.
like a little
Watch wraps.
a little
I'm there.
thing. You kind of like heat shrink it on.
Yeah, that would
take
be
off
sick.
the dial.
Because you just could take it off. But if you could walk around with your Pepsi for a week with like, like just some like crazy like tie-dye wrap, wouldn't you? Why not?
Wouldn't you?
I don't know. I think maybe for some watches.
Yeah.
But isn't that what changing the strap is for?
Just take it to another level.
I mean, isn't that the
No,
skins?
this completely destroys the appearance of it. Obliterates any recognizability or anything.
Yeah.
But see, now I'm going to admit my vanity, and sometimes it's like, yeah, but I want someone to know that. I mean, this starts our whole conversation again. I want someone to think that I'm a good person or I'm successful, and so I'll wear that watch so that I think that they think that, which I recognize is fucked up. Whatever, but that's I also make a podcast. I mean, what else do you want me to do? I don't know. If no one knows it's a Speedmaster, is it a Speedmaster?
I think there's only one way to find out. Like one of us needs to buy like one of those like little Cricut printers that can like die cut stickers, and we'll just try it out.
Or you can just have multiple freaking Swatch Speedies.
You got the MoonSwatchs there. Mm-hmm.
I have 4 of them now.
Really?
Oh, you're a MoonSwatch collector. Look at that.
But I don't mean to be. It's I got the opportunity to get it, and I got one. And then I got the opportunity, and then I had a bunch of friends who were like, "Oh, can you get me one?" And so then I went, and at one time the Swatch guy was like, "Yeah." He's like, "How many do you want?" And I was like, I'll just take one more." So I got another one, give it to a friend, and then another friend hooks me up, and I'm able to get more, and I get them, and then I go to the friends who wanted them. I'm like, "Hey guys, you wanted a MoonSwatch? you still really want it?" And they're like, no." And so I have them. And so I was like, whatever, I'm just going to put them on my desk.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't really, it's a fun watch to wear, but they're both wildly inaccurate.
Really?
And I will say this, I have 4, not a single one on my desk has the hands correctly aligned.
Wow.
No, I feel like I was really lucky. The one I got, it keeps very good time. I haven't had any of the issues that I've heard from other people, but if you have 4 and 4 out of 4 are they're off, that's pretty rough.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know how well you can see it on the thing here, but like it's not whatever. This is pointless me trying to show it on the webcam, but it's like, yeah, the if you look at it straight on, the second hand is just a little bit to the right of
like not enough that you can use the
o'clock.
adjustment, because there's like a way to adjust them, but it's probably a whole second. It's not like a micro.
Correct.
Yeah.
No.
And then also like the timer of the Speedmaster, like the second timer, like that should just be correct straight up at 12 o'clock, is at like 12 3/4.
Yeah, that would drive me crazy. But it's
well, that's why I don't really wear it.
Well, it's funny. It's funny
here.
with the MoonSwatch because like we had a couple in the office. You and Bettner both got one or 2. I don't know which ones you guys have, but like
We only got one each. Yeah.
I wanted one really badly when they launched, and it's just like,
Do you want one? I have. I will send you one. I will send you
Yeah,
one.
sure.
100% dead on the mark.
yeah, no,
Yeah.
and I called around all the Swatch stores in the city a few weeks ago, and they were still just basically telling you to buzz off. So like, no, because it's funny because the day it sort of launched, Zach and I, we were all kind of talking about it in the office, and like, so we went through. This is a bit of a backstory, but like about a year ago, we went through a bit of a branding exercise with the company, and one of the things that kind of came out of it was a tagline called "Experience Enthusiasm," sort of an unofficial tagline for Worn and Wound, because we feel like that's really what we're about. It's not about collecting high-priced items.
2 E's or 2 X's?
Two.
Oh no, they spelled correctly. We're not.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Totally.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
I appreciate that.
Experience.
Just, fair question.
Yeah.
To the extreme. We would have had to go there.
And like when those things came out, it was kind of like the perfect example of that, which was like, it's not about these things being hard to get anymore because of the price tag. It's about having fun with it and letting everyone experience the Speedmaster enthusiasm. And then no one could get them. It like ruined the whole premise. And it was just like, what a bummer. Cause like everyone should be able to experience that, like it is like as a Speedmaster owner and like it is one of those silhouettes that is just perfect. Like, it's just sort of hard to explain, or at least I can't really explain it super well, but like, it's just such a bummer that project had so much potential to kind of get a really iconic watch on everyone's wrist and it just totally fluttered.
They'll put it online in a year or two.
Yeah.
I feel like they totally will. It's just right now, like, would you rather, I mean, if you're some sort of company and you're maybe not doing as good as you were, you want to have a hype train that's just chugging along.
For sure.
But that's watches. The fact that watches and marketing are so intertwined, I think, is what turns a lot of people off of watches in general. But anyway, we're starting to wrap up because I know you guys got a lot of shit you got to do. But before we do, these are questions that sound kind of dumb, but I'm serious. Do you think it's easy for people to get into watches now? And like, if you do, what are the things you think that people should think about when they're starting to get into watches?
Okay. I feel like that's an article. I could write quite a bit about that. But yeah, do I think it's easy to get into? I do. I think it's easier now than it was because there is easier access to quality media and information about watches. And not to pat ourselves on the back, but I think we're part of that, and so many other larger media sites, but other forums and things like that. Like it's all out there. Reddit too. So it's not like impossible to discover interesting things or learn about something that's maybe common and been around for a long time. What was the second part? Like what to look for, or like
like what are the things that you should be paying attention to if you're going to get into watches, or that you wish people would do more when they start to do it?
Gosh, I mean that's difficult a little bit just because I feel like it depends so much on like how you're entering, what you're how much you're looking to spend initially, because there's different like quality and different concerns that might come up at different price points, and once again, like the idea of value also is sort of in the eye of the beholder. Like if you're really looking to maximize value at like $5,000, you could pick one brand over another. In the end of the day, like I think what really matters most is that you really, really want it. Like if you really love the watch, the way it looks, it resonates with you, it's something that really gets you excited. Wearing it will also be really enjoyable, or maybe it will be less enjoyable than you thought it would, and you'll learn why, and then you're kind of in this cycle at that point, and you'll start thinking about what's next and what follows, and it kind of goes from there. So like what I wouldn't do is buy a watch just because someone told you to. Or like if I wouldn't say go buy a Seiko 5 right now, but maybe you should. It's a great watch to start with, but only if you really like it. Only if you really like it. If it calls out to you, get it. If it doesn't, move on. Don't buy it just because I said so,
Mm-hmm. I think that's very true. Yeah, I mean, I always tell people just don't settle. Like my older brother really wanted to get like the SPB, and so he got all these other watches that were way less expensive and was annoyed that he got them. And then by the time he had enough money to get the SPB, which I think was like $1,000, that Seiko, the diver tribute, he had spent basically close to $2,000 on 5 or 6 watches that he didn't really wear or want. When the truth is, he could have just spent $1,000. It just took longer. I think it's like the fact that we're all kind of somewhat brainwashed by Amazon and getting it next day or whatever. You just kind of like, I found this, I'm excited, I researched it, I want it, and if you can't get it yet, people are like, well, I'll just get this, and that'll suffice, and it just does not.
Yeah. That's definitely a good suggestion. And like something I think about, like my girlfriend and I had a rule when we were looking for apartments last time, which is like a single red flag was enough to just say no to the whole thing. Cause like we ignored red flags at a place and there were several and we got screwed. We had a miserable year in a hellhole. And then it was just like one thing. We don't like one thing. We don't like the way the garbage sits out front. We don't like the way the door like out, just leave.
Whoa.
Granted, the market was different then. There were more options, but I feel like you could apply that to everything. If something doesn't feel right, walk away. There's more,
Yeah. I think I would also just, see the sort of both questions, is it easier to get into watches than it once was? I think, when we started Worn and Wound, if someone was like, hey, I want to get into watches, what do I do? Well, okay, so make an account on Watch You Seek and do your best to navigate that platform and,
ouch.
Read Hodinkee, which is still a great publication, but maybe those price points aren't quite where you are. Read us, whatever the case may be, but you really kind of have to be a nerd and be able to navigate things. Now it's like make an account on Watch Crunch, and that's like a really friendly community of people all about watches, and follow these people on Instagram.
I don't even know what Watch Crunch is.
Yeah, no, it's funny, it's a watch social media network, basically, the social media platform, and they're really cultivating a great community of people. It's knowledgeable but friendly and easy to use. So I'm not trying to sell it, but it's a good place that like we've all kind of jumped onto individually and seem to be enjoying. And full disclosure, Warner Wound is doing some work with them, but like it's a great network of people. But that kind of thing like definitely never existed before. So it's just like there's so many easier ways to just jump into the community now and just see stuff and like not get wedded to this one thing, or really be able to compare and contrast or ask questions or whatever the case may be. Like it's a lot easier to make
probably also like a local meetup near you kind of a thing at this point. I feel like they've spawned up in every city, and if you can go look at watches firsthand, I mean, nothing beats it. So
for sure.
Yeah, 'cause I think it's harder to get into watches now. Yeah, I mean, I don't think you guys are wrong. There's just so many options, and I think my mindset. I'm always like, I want to make the right decision. I want to make the right decision, but it's like there's just decision like fatigue. There are so many. Like, I mean, Watch Crunch sounds amazing. I've never heard of that. Now I'm like, oh, do I need to be on that? Do I need to set a bunch of time to that? And then do I need to know all these other things? And so I think it's just instead of, it used to just be like one or two places where you could go and like that was it. There's really nowhere else. Now it's like, yeah,
for sure.
You got people, all sorts of swatches and eBays and whatnots and
I guess
marketplaces. And
I totally understand that, because like as well, from coming from the perspective of like, I would say I've always had some level of interest in like menswear and men's fashion, but not really the wherewithal to delve into it, or my extra cash is going to watches as a thing. And now I've wanted to get a little bit more into it, and like, God help me. Just, I don't even like starting to read about it. It's rough. It's rough to get into it all. But I could see somebody having the exact same feeling looking at Watch World. It's just like being inundated, not knowing exactly where to begin, which I guess is sort of the hardest thing, is where do you literally start? And I would recommend a friendly, well-worded website called Warner. But like, he's got to.
That's okay.
He's got to browse.
Wait, what's happening with the menswear thing?
Well, not very much. I mean, what happens is I end up buying a few things, and then I'm like, ugh, that didn't really fit me very well, and then I'm like, I'm gonna give up on this for a few months, and then I'm like, oh shit, I got an event I got to go to, so now I have a reason to buy something nice, and then I don't know, it's difficult.
Do you return things?
No,
like, do you buy things and do you ever return?
I was in Manhattan yesterday, that sounds like, that shouldn't sound weird. It is weird. Going to Manhattan sucks. So I don't go to Manhattan very often. So I was near the Uniqlo, and I ended up buying 2 shirts. And I'm looking at one of the like button-down shirts. I'm looking at one of them today. I'm like, what the hell was I thinking? Maybe it was the lighting in the store. Like, it is ugly. It's an ugly shirt. But God, going back.
Are you going to return it?
Sounds a little bit like a you problem. Zach, I feel like...
Yeah. I return... I mean, if it's like ordered online, it's honestly easier to return. The in-store shopping experience for like clothing is kind of, I don't know. This might be controversial. It's kind of absolutely horrible. I mean, maybe if you go to a very nice store, like a tailor, a place, like some of the brands I know you're friendly with, like an Armory or something, where they're like, it's very customer driven and it's very specific. But big box stores, your average stores, you go in there, you're out of inventory. They didn't have the one thing you wanted to try on. Going back to it, if you decide later, it's like when, it's a pain in the ass.
I think, well, it's also like, it's interesting, like, what do you think is expensive or too expensive for you if you're going to buy a shirt? And you don't need to like start listing all these numbers, but I think like in my head, I'll see a watch and I'm like, oh, it's only this. That's actually really affordable. And then I'll see clothes or something else. And, I think it's like, I've spent so many years of my life like justifying value.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
No, I'm guilty of the same thing. Like we did an event at Standard & Strange not long ago, and they have just so many like beautiful things in that store. And in my mind, I just kept thinking like, wow, that's so much for a sweater. And it's just like, dude,
right?
Like, it's, yes.
So much for a watch. It just tells the time. I mean, come on.
Yes, it's a lot for a watch and it's a lot for a sweater, but it's a little bit hypocritical to be like, wow, that $300 sweater's too much for me, when like, it's worth every penny.
That's okay.
I've gotten used to spending like at this point I buy, I don't know, probably regret saying this in public, right? It's like I buy like, I've bought a lot of like jackets, like over like blazers, field coats, chore coats, and I've become very comfortable in the like $300 to $400 range for a nice, which I know know isn't even that much in the scheme of things, but it's like, it's a starting point for, like at Spear and McKay or something, you can get I feel like it's a very nice jacket at around $350 or something. But then like, yeah, I don't know, pants, I'm just like, ugh, they're gonna fall apart on me. I don't know, man. Like, I'm gonna buy Gap on sale jeans, whatever, you know. But then, but you know, I know it fits there too. I know it fits there too. I mean, like I said, we were at Standard and Strange, and I do want to go back to try on their denim in front of our like fans of the brand. Me trying on denim didn't feel like the right timing.
Oh yeah,
so I have to go back and do that. But yeah,
I don't shop with friends.
No,
It's a humbling experience to try anything on when how you thought it's going to look in your head doesn't look that way.
Yeah,
I mean, and I already have like body image issues and stuff, but it's like, you know, I'll go and I'll try on something and I'm like, oh, well, wait, I saw how it looked in this picture. It does not look like that on me. And you know, and it's like, oh, it's because your thighs are too big or that, you know, whatever. And I'm like,
preaching to the choir here, man.
You know? Yeah, no. Yeah. I feel like these are one of the things that Zach and I like bonded over was just like self-loathing of our appearance and like like I'll definitely go to shopping and like by the end of it I'm just like I need to talk to my therapist and I'm gonna go lay in bed for a month and like this was the worst experience of my life. Sometimes you just go and you buy things easily, but yeah, it's a tough. Honestly, like I was thinking about this when you guys were talking earlier. Like it's part of what's so great about watches is like, of course, certain watches look better to you than others, but you're never gonna have to worry about them fitting onto your wrist. Just get a larger band or like add a link. You know what I mean? Like no one's judging you. You know, it all fit.
But however, I think there is, if you're like, say you're into jeans, there is seriously a denim brand and a denim cut for every single body type. Whether you think you're too big or you're too skinny or you're too whatever, you want a high rise, you want a low rise, you want a wide leg, you want a straight leg, you want a wide leg with a low rise and a taper, you want a wide, you know, they exist. It just is a pain in the ass because they all kind of look the same. And then you have to work and figure it out. And you might pay $300 or $400 or something. Like you might pay, like a few $100s for that denim. But like sugarcane, all that stuff, Resolute, Ironheart, all those things, it fits you guys easy. I would say you're not as unique as you think you are.
I don't think I'm unique. Well, if you go to Uniqlo though, you're quickly
Uniqlo.
I mean, it just the pants at Uniqlo are like a really quick way to body imaging issues. It's just like, you're not 6'4" and have a 28-inch waist. Like, get the fuck out of our store. That's cheap crap anyway. Like, I go there regularly, but I just don't buy jeans.
Don't buy. Yeah, I mean, it's like, don't buy jeans at Uniqlo. Yeah. If they work for you and you already get them, fine. Someone's gonna be like, well, I buy jeans at Uniqlo. Well, fine. But
there was a little while where I did. I was like my 20s. I was working out a lot, and I finally fit jeans. I'm like, sweet. You know, not anymore.
But anyway, gents, thank you so much for chatting. It was good to talk to you. I'll see ya. Thanks so much for listening. You've been listening to Blamo. We're edited by Amarlal, our music by Breakmaster Cylinder, and we're produced by Blamo Media. If you like the show, tell a friend, give us some good vibes. You can follow us on social media at Blamo Podcast or send us an email at info@blamopod.com. And if you want all the Blamo you can handle, join us over on Patreon at patreon.com/Blamo, where we have our exclusive shows from Blamo Presents Derek Guy to the Triple J show with John Moy and Gian Delian, and geez, there's Blamo Extra. There's all sorts of stuff, and the amazing, incredible Slack group. All right, that's it from me. See you soon.